Elena Rossi, 24, could read danger off a plate. She could smell when butter had broken before it touched the pan. She could tell from one breath over a rim of porcelain whether a sauce had gone metallic from cheap wine or a cook's shaking hand. But the night she switched his plate, she couldn't detect the man already watching her from the far end of the private room. One poisoned veal course. One room full of armed silence. One decision made with 2 steady fingers and no permission. That choice cost her the last clean shape of her life. Because the man she saved was Dante Salvatore. In his world, women like Elena served wine, cleared dishes, and kept their eyes lowered. They did not interfere with death. They did not move food already placed before a king, and they definitely did not do it without asking for something in return. But she did, and in the shadows Dante stood perfectly still. Mafia boss, son of a blood-soaked dynasty, a man driven by one old wound he had never survived. The plate shattered, and so did everything after it. The first thing I noticed about Dante Salvatore was not his face. It was the sound, a clean click. Metal against porcelain. Slow once, then once again. His signet ring touched the edge of the plate in front of him as if he was counting down to something only he could hear. Private room 3 at Belladonna had gone silent the moment he arrived. Not quiet. Silent. There was a difference. Quiet belonged to expensive places and expensive people who liked pretending money made them elegant. Silence belonged to rooms where armed men stood still enough to become furniture. I was carrying the second course when I understood I had made a mistake volunteering to cover for Matteo. Not because the men at the table scared me, though they did. Not because Dante Salvatore sat at the center of them with his dark suit, his unreadable face, and that air some men had when violence had obeyed them for too long. Because the veal smelled wrong. The scent reached me one step before the table did. Brown butter. Sage. White wine reduction. And beneath it, bitter almond. So faint another waitress would have missed it. So faint a chef already buried in dinner service might have blamed the amaretto from dessert prep, but I had spent enough years in kitchens to know when a smell didn't belong to the dish it rode in on. My hands did not shake. That was the part that always surprised people. I got frightened like anyone else. I just didn't do it loudly. I set down the first plate, then the second. Then I came to him. Dante looked up, not fully, just enough. His eyes were darker than coffee left too long on the burner. Not warm, not cold either. Just final. I put the plate in front of him. My heart kicked once. Hard. Then I touched the porcelain rim with 2 fingers, felt the unnatural slickness of the sauce, smelled that whisper again, and said, "I'm sorry. This one cooled too fast." Before anyone could answer, I lifted his plate away and replaced it with the spare I had balanced beneath my arm for the table's late request. A trick waitresses learned in busy dining rooms. Always carry a correction before someone asked for it. One of the men at the table frowned. He didn't say a word. I looked at him, not at Dante. Good service anticipates disappointment. I turned and let the first plate slip. It hit the marble with a violent crack. Sauce spread in a pale gold fan. Porcelain shattered against the leg of the table. The room moved all at once. Chairs scraping, hands under jackets, one bodyguard stepping between Dante and the mess before the pieces stopped spinning. "I'm so sorry," I said, but Dante had not looked at me. He was looking at the floor, at the broken veal, at the sauce, at the sweet, ugly smell rising stronger now that heat and impact had freed it. "Everyone out," he said. His voice was quiet. That was worse. The manager rushed in first, pale and sweating, babbling apologies. The kitchen door slammed somewhere behind me. Someone gripped my elbow. Hard. I twisted automatically, but the man holding me only tightened his hand and said, "Stay still." I did. Because Dante finally looked at me then. Not like a man noticing a waitress. Not like a man noticing a woman. Like a man noticing the exact second a line of his life had changed direction. "You knew," he said. It wasn't a question. My mouth went dry. I smelled it. What? Bitter almond. The manager made a weak sound. One of the guards pulled him forward so fast his shoes squealed across the floor. Dante rose. He was taller than I had thought. Tall enough that when he stepped around the broken plate, the entire room adjusted itself to make space. Men like him did that. They altered air pressure. He came close enough for me to smell his cologne under the colder scent of night air caught in wool. Cedar, citrus, and something dark I could not name. He stopped one breath away. "You moved it," he said. "Yes, you dropped it instead of naming it." I swallowed. If I had shouted poison in a room full of men with guns, someone would have fired. The bodyguard on my left gave a short, startled laugh that died immediately. Dante's expression did not change. "And you asked for nothing." I stared at the knot of his tie because looking directly at him felt like stepping too near a ledge. I was working. His gaze dropped to my hands, my bare wrist. The cheap apron tied too tight at my waist, then up again. Name. Elena Rossi. Family? The question hit harder than it should have. A brother. Parents? Gone. His eyes stayed on mine too long. Someone crossed the room at a run. Another of Dante's men. He bent low and murmured something in Italian. I only caught fragments. Kitchen. Camera blind spot. Delivery. Dante did not look away from me when he answered. "Lock the restaurant down." The manager whimpered. I hated that sound on principle. "I didn't do anything," I said. "No," Dante said. "You did exactly one thing." He reached past me then, not touching, only taking the order pad from my apron pocket with a motion so precise it made my pulse jump. He glanced at the page, at the stains, the hurried handwriting, the name at the top where I had marked the private room. Then he folded it once and gave it to his man. "Take Miss Rossi with us." I stepped back. "Absolutely not." The bodyguard's hand returned to my elbow. Dante tilted his head slightly, almost curious. "You believe you get a choice, little sparrow." The name landed strange, not sweet, not kind. "A small thing observed in the wild. I have a shift," I said, because fear made me stupid in very practical ways. For the first time, one corner of his mouth nearly moved. "It's over." I thought of my brother Luca, at home with the rent envelope I hadn't yet hidden from him. I thought of the train brochure folded in my bag for Florence. For culinary school. For a life that smelled like sugar, instead of blood. I thought of running. Then I looked at the broken plate, at the men already stripping the room down to evidence and consequence. At Dante Salvatore, who had realized exactly what I had saved. The car outside was black. Expensive. The sort of car that did not wait for permission from traffic or God. When they walked me out through the service corridor, the kitchen staff would not look at me. The night air hit cold. The door opened. I did not scream. I got in. The lock fell with a soft, finished sound. Home was over. No one tells you what fear does to time. It doesn't speed it up. It doesn't slow it down. It breaks it into pieces so small you can only survive one of them at once. The drive lasted forever, and 15 minutes. I spent most of it watching city lights smear across the window and pretending the man beside me wasn't armed. Across from me, Dante sat with one ankle over the opposite knee, jacket still buttoned, face unreadable. If I hadn't seen what happened in the restaurant, I could have mistaken him for a man on his way to the opera instead of a man whose dinner had nearly killed him. He did not ask me anything else. That unsettled me more than questions would have. The villa stood above the city like old money-given walls. Iron gates, stone lions, windows lit gold against the dark. When the car curved up the long drive, I caught the shape of cypress trees and a fountain dry for winter. Inside, marble floors held the cold like a grudge. A woman in her 40s met us in the entrance hall. Dark hair pinned back, black dress. No softness wasted anywhere on her face. "Marta," Dante said. She looked at me once, efficiently. Shoes, hands, expression, fear. "Another stray?" she asked. His gaze shifted to her. "A guest." Marta looked unimpressed by the distinction. Guests normally arrive with luggage. "I'd like mine," I muttered. Her eyes flicked back to me. Something almost human moved there. That can be arranged. Dante handed her my coat himself, which somehow felt more intimate than if he had touched my skin. She stays in the east wing, he said. 2 guards outside, no one, and without my order. I'm standing right here, I said. He looked at me then. Good. It saves time. Marta led me upstairs before I could think of something smarter to say. The room she opened for me was larger than my entire apartment. High ceiling, cream walls, a bed that looked too expensive to sleep in. French doors opening onto a dark terrace. The wardrobe already stood open with neatly arranged clothing I did not own. I stared. This is kidnapping with better linens. That depends, Marta said, on whether anyone asks you if you'd prefer cotton. I turned to her. Should I laugh? No, but if Nino says anything, don't encourage him. As if summoned by warning, a man appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with tea, water, and the expression of someone personally offended by carbohydrates. He was handsome in a narrow, tired way, with a gold chain at his throat and the face of a saint painted by an impatient artist. Signorina, he said, placing the tray down. I'm Nino Esposito, driver, logistics, occasional therapist to men with guns, and currently a victim of Marta Bellini's war on flavor. Marta folded her arms. You ate 6 cannoli yesterday. Because I was grieving. You were not grieving. I was pre-grieving. You make boiled fish like an insult. Against all reason, a laugh escaped me. Nino pressed a hand to his chest. There, you see? Already I'm doing the Lord's work. Shall I continue? Or would you like the formal tour of your imprisonment? Marta sighed with the patience of a woman who had long since stopped expecting dignity from the universe. Don't flirt with the witness. I'm not flirting, Nino said. I'm charming under difficult conditions. There's a difference. He glanced at me again, softer this time. Drink the tea, signorina. Nobody survives this house on an empty stomach. After he left, still muttering about protein and joy, Marta shut the door and studied me. You should understand something, she said. If the boss brought you here, it means he believes the danger around you is real, or that I know too much. Both can be true. I walked to the window and wrapped my arms around myself. The terrace stone beyond the glass looked silver in the moonlight. When do I go home? When he decides the answer to that won't bury you. I turned back. Do you always defend him? No. Her mouth flattened. Sometimes I warn people. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Dante Salvatore is not cruel for sport. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Men who enjoy violence are easy to understand. Men who use it like punctuation are not. That sat inside me all wrong. Marta left me with clean clothes and silence. I changed, because the smell of restaurant smoke and fear had sunk into my skin. The dress laid out for me was dark green and absurdly soft, too pretty to belong to a locked room. When I came downstairs an hour later because fear had become restlessness and restlessness had become hunger, I found Dante in the library. Of course he had a library. Of course it looked like a cathedral where books had replaced saints. He stood by the fire with a glass untouched in his hand. The light carved his face into something older than the man I'd seen at the restaurant, more tired. On the table beside him sat a silver tray with a fresh plate, covered and cooling. He heard me before I spoke. You should be asleep. You should let me leave. His gaze moved to the tray, then to me. You think the attempt ended in that dining room? I think you are not the only frightening thing in the city. A beat passed. Then, good. I hated how that made my pulse jump. He set the glass down. The signet ring clicked once against crystal this time. Tell me exactly how you knew. I told him. The almond bitterness, the wrong heat of the sauce, the way the garnish had been reapplied after the plate sat too long. He listened without interrupting. That, too, was unnerving. Most men interrupted women as naturally as breathing. When I finished, he asked, Who taught you to notice? My mother cooked. My father worked supply. I grew up in kitchens. He nodded once, like he was filing away a weapon. Then he crossed the room. Not fast, not threatening, just inevitable. He stopped close enough that if I leaned forward an inch, my forehead would touch his chest. I didn't. He lifted his hand as if to brush a strand of hair from my cheek, and stopped. That stillness felt louder than touch. From now on, he said, letting his hand fall back to his side. You do not eat or drink anything that doesn't come through Marta or me. Do you hear yourself? Yes. And that sounds normal to you? No. His eyes held mine. Necessary. I should have looked away. I didn't. Little Sparrow, he said softly, as if testing whether the name fit me or the moment. Your normal is gone. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. I believed him. I woke to church bells somewhere below the hill and the smell of coffee I hadn't asked for. For one stupid second, I thought I was in my apartment. Then I opened my eyes to silk curtains and a painted ceiling and remembered the black car, the marble, the lock I had heard on the outside of my own life. Marta had left a tray near the window. Espresso, toast, sliced pear, a note in precise handwriting. Eat. You think better when fed. The note irritated me because it was true. By noon, I had paced the length of my room enough times to memorize the pattern in the rug, argued with the guard outside twice, and learned that the East Wing had exactly 3 doors, 2 cameras, and no useful weaknesses unless I planned to escape through 3rd-story stone. At 1, Marta opened the door. You're coming with me. Where? The kitchen. My shoes nearly slipped on the polished corridor because I turned so fast. Why? Because the boss wants lunch. She gave me a look. And because if you don't use those hands for something besides worrying, you'll lose your mind by sunset. The kitchen at the villa was larger than Belladonna's pastry room. Copper pans, hanging herbs, a marble island white as bone. 3 cooks moved with the contained panic of men who knew excellence was safer than apology. Nino occupied a stool by the counter eating plain grilled chicken with the tragic expression of a widower. He brightened when he saw me. Ah, salvation. Tell Marta she is shortening my life with health. Marta did not look up from the inventory ledger. I'm lengthening it against your will. Cruel woman. One day you'll miss me. One day I'll enjoy the silence. I smiled despite myself and tied on the apron Marta handed me. The fabric smelled of soap and rosemary. Familiar, almost enough to make my throat close. One of the cooks slid a bowl of pastry cream toward me without comment. On the stove, 2 sauces reduced at once. Bread proofed under linen, a pot of stock murmured low and rich in the background. Kitchens made sense to me in a way people rarely did. Fire, salt, heat, timing. If something failed, there was usually a reason, not always a fair one, but a reason. What do you need? I asked. Marta glanced at the tray set apart from the others. Dante hasn't touched lunch in 2 days unless someone brings it directly. Make something he'll eat. That sounds less like cooking and more like priesthood. Nino pointed a fork at me. Exactly. And if you can perform miracles, ask the saints for bread. I opened the pantry and took stock. Veal, cutlets, lemons, capers, fennel, basil, blood oranges, fresh ricotta, dark chocolate, pistachios. My hands moved before my fear could interfere. I made saltimbocca because it was fast and comforting and hard to distrust when done properly. For dessert, I started a small chocolate tart with orange cream and a sugar shell so thin it would crack under the back of a spoon. I didn't know why I made that too. Maybe because I had been holding myself together by pressure alone. Maybe because sugar gave me somewhere to put what I couldn't say. Nino wandered over while I tempered chocolate. So, he said, voice low with manufactured casualness, have you decided whether you're here as a hostage, a witness, or the answer to all my nutritional suffering? Probably the first 2. Shame. I was rooting for the 3rd. He lowered his voice further. Marta likes you. No, she doesn't. She brought you into her kitchen. That's basically an adoption. Marta spoke without turning. Nino. He sighed. See? Music. I finished plating and wiped the rim of Dante's dish with a cloth until nothing imperfect remained. Habit, respect, fear, all mixed together. Marta took the tray. Dante's voice sounded from the archway before she could move. Leave it. Every head in the room altered direction by a fraction. He had entered so quietly, I hadn't heard the door. That should not have surprised me. Men like Dante rarely announced themselves. The room simply learned they were there and corrected its posture. His gaze landed first on the plate, then on me. You made it. It wasn't a question. He noticed too much for questions. Yes. Nino slid off his stool with the solemnity of a man leaving church. Boss, before you eat, I'd like it recorded that if I die of bland food while you feast on this, I want a dramatic memorial. You're getting a plaque in the garage, Marta said. Dante pulled out the chair at the head of the prep table and sat. Men didn't usually sit in the kitchen here. I knew that instantly by how startled the cooks looked. He tasted the veal. No one breathed. He set his fork down after the second bite and looked at me with that same unnerving focus from Belladonna. My mother used too much sage. I blinked. That sounds like a complaint. It's not. Something warm and traitorous moved in my chest. He tried the tart next. The sugar shell cracked under his spoon with a fragile, exact sound. He tasted it, said nothing for several seconds. What is it called? I hadn't meant to name it, but the answer came anyway. Glass heart. Nino made a sound like a prayer. God help me. Even the dessert in this house is romantic. Marta swatted the back of his head with a towel. Dante still looked at the tart. Why? I should have lied. Instead, I heard myself say, because the top looks hard. It breaks easiest. Silence moved through the kitchen differently after that. Not threatening. Listening, Dante's gaze lifted slowly from the dessert to my face. I wished it wouldn't. I wished it did. One of his men entered then, fast enough to break the moment. Matteo Gallo, broad shoulders, scar at the jaw. Eyes too kind for the work he did, held out a phone. Boss. Warehouse fire in Ostia, 2 trucks. Dante rose at once. His chair barely made a sound. Casualties? Not ours. Warning shot. His expression didn't change, but the kitchen temperature seemed to drop anyway. He turned to leave, then paused. Looked back at me. Stay inside today. I wasn't planning a seaside walk. His eyes touched the tart once more. Little sparrow, he said, quieter now, you notice what doesn't belong. Keep doing that. Then he was gone. Nino let out a breath. Well, that was intimate and terrifying. My favorite combination. Later, when the kitchen emptied and the light went honey-colored through the windows, I found my phone on a sideboard where Marta had placed it charging. No messages from Luca. None. Only one new envelope on the table beside it. My name on the front, in my father's handwriting. I went cold all over. From the doorway, Dante watched me stop. He already knew what it was. I did not open the envelope immediately. That was the part I hated most about myself sometimes. That I could stand with my pulse hammering in my throat and still choose postponement, like it was a form of control. My father had been dead 6 years. At least, that was the story I had been given. Found in a wrecked car outside Naples after agreeing to testify in some supply fraud case that had nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with the rumors that followed his name after. We buried a closed casket because closed caskets make liars out of grief. You don't get answers, you get wood. So when I saw his handwriting, my knees almost gave out. Dante crossed the room but stopped before touching me. Always that. Always the stopping. Where did you get this? I asked. It was in an archive box taken from a warehouse we seized last night. Why was my father's name in your archive? His gaze rested on the envelope. Open it. The paper crackled under my fingers. Inside was one folded sheet and an old recipe card stained at the edge with what might have been wine or rust. My father's neat block script covered both. If anything happens, do not trust what they say about me. Taste before you believe. I read it twice before the words settled into meaning. On the recipe card were quantities for an orange syrup, notes in the margins, and one line underlined hard enough to nearly tear the paper. Bitter almond hidden by citrus only fools the arrogant. My breath snagged. What is this? Dante's face went very still. Your father worked as more than a supplier. No. He consulted on import chains, food, wines, compounds that could pass through kitchens without drawing notice. I backed away from him. You're saying he worked for you? For my family, he said. Years ago. The room tilted. I might have said more. I might have shouted. But the chapel bells from the family wing began then, low and solemn, carrying through stone. I turned toward the sound before I could stop myself. Marta appeared at the far end of the corridor, already in a black coat. We need to leave. What happened? I asked. One of our men's wives died in childbirth, she said. Dante is standing godfather for the baby. The information landed strangely beside the letter in my hand. Death and beginning sharing a wall. Mafia world seemed to like that kind of cruelty. We drove to a small chapel near Trastevere at dusk. Rain glazed the cobblestones gunmetal. Inside, candles burned against wet stone and tired saints. I told myself I went because Marta refused to leave me alone at the villa and because I wanted to ask Dante 100 things he had not answered. The baby cried through most of the service. Nino cried a little too, though he denied it when Marta handed him a handkerchief. It's incense, he whispered hoarsely. And fasting. Buyer, she whispered back. I stood at the rear until the first shot broke the stained glass hush. Everything after that happened in pieces. A bodyguard falling. The baby screaming. Marta shoving the mother behind the altar rail. Dante turning before anyone else had even named the direction. Then his hand on the back of my neck forcing me down. We hit the floor together behind a pew as marble chipped above us. Gunfire in a chapel sounded wrong in a way my bones understood. Too loud. Too close. Holy things breaking under ordinary evil. Stay down, he said, as if I had another plan. His mouth almost moved. Then he was gone from behind the pew, drawn low and fast through smoke and splintered wood. I saw only pieces of him between bodies and benches. His shoulder, his gun hand, the black line of his suit. Efficient. Not wild. That was what frightened me most. He moved through violence as if he had long ago stopped requiring anger to perform it. Someone grabbed my ankle. I gasped and kicked, but it was Matteo Gallo dragging me deeper behind the stone baptismal font. You all right? I don't know. Good enough. More shots. Then silence. Not peace, just the abrupt stop of something finished. When Dante came back, blood marked his shirt cuff and one sleeve, dark and wet. Not all of it was his. I knew that from his face. Men wore their own pain differently. You're hit, I said. It's nothing. It's blood. He looked at me, then at my hand, which was still fisted around my father's recipe card. Come here, Marta ordered, and somehow all of us obeyed her. Back at the villa, she cut Dante's shirt sleeve open in the downstairs sitting room while Nino prowled by the decanter muttering prayers and calorie counts. The bullet had carved a line high along Dante's arm, not deep. Ugly enough, Marta cleaned it. Dante did not flinch. I did, he saw. For one breath, something in his face changed. Not softer, more exposed than that. Like I had accidentally stepped into a room he kept locked. First time? He asked. Seeing a man shot? Yes, seeing him shot. That felt like a different question. Yes. He held my gaze while Marta wrapped fresh bandage around his arm. Look away next time. I should have said I would. Instead, I heard myself answer, you didn't. Nino, hovering by the sideboard, muttered, Saints preserve me. They're flirting over antiseptic. Marta threw a rolled bandage at his head without looking. He caught it one-handed and clutched his chest. When she finished, Dante stood. The cut shirt hung open for a moment before he reached for a clean one. Scars crossed his ribs and shoulder. One old pale line set just under his collarbone like a memory sharpened into flesh. I stared at it too long. He noticed. His hand stilled on the shirt button. That almost his bare skin, my eyes. The hot hush between us stretched until I thought it might break into something else. Then he fastened the shirt. Of course he did. Marco Viscari ordered belladonna hit, Matteo said from the doorway. We found the chef he paid. Fast mystery. Simple answer. But Dante's attention stayed on me for one more impossible beat before he turned away. Then Marco dies, he said. He said it the way another man might say the weather would change by morning. No performance. No threat. Just punctuation. Later, in the corridor outside the sitting room, he caught my wrist before I reached my door. Not tight. Just enough to stop me. The signet ring brushed my skin, cool as the marble under our feet. Your father tried to warn someone, he said. Who? A beat. My sister. I stopped breathing. He released me as if the contact had already lasted too long, and walked away before I could ask the question tearing through me. Sleep became a negotiation after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dante in the chapel's smoke-steady blood on his sleeve, moving like violence had learned his name by heart. Then I saw my father's handwriting under my lamp, sharp and undeniable. By morning, I trusted neither dream nor memory. Marta found me in the kitchen before sunrise with the recipe card beside a bowl of orange zest. You're slicing too thin, she said. I know. Then stop punishing the fruit for being innocent. I looked up despite myself. Was that comfort? No. She set down a cup of coffee at my elbow. That was efficiency. Still, she stayed. The house was quieter in the mornings, less armor in it, statues whispering over stone, espresso machines hissing awake, the guards by the terrace doors speaking low Sicilian to each other until Dante entered and every syllable straightened. He stopped at the counter watching me score pistachios with the tip of my knife. You're armed, I said without looking up. He glanced at the blade in my hand. So are you. I should have laughed. Instead I asked, what happened to your sister? The room seemed to contract. Marta went perfectly still at the stove. Even the kettle sounded too loud. Dante's signet ring tapped once against the marble. Not now. Convenient. His gaze lowered to the recipe card beside my cutting board. There are things I'm confirming. That means yes. It means I don't give unfinished truths. Anger rose faster than fear that morning. Maybe because I was tired of being the last person told things about my own life. You brought me here. You put my dead father's handwriting in my hand. I think I've earned more than riddles. The space between us tightened. Then his phone vibrated. He read the message, expression flattening further. Your brother is missing, he said. My knife hit the board with a hard crack. I stared. What? We sent men to your apartment this morning. He wasn't there. No sound came out for a second. Then too many. Why were your men at my apartment? Why are you touching anything in my life? Luca is 21. He goes out. He disappears. He's irresponsible. He also owes 70,000 euros. I went cold. Marta swore softly under her breath. Nino, entering with a paper bag and a tragic hope for breakfast pastries, froze in the doorway. I gripped the counter edge. How do you know that? Because Viscari's bookie is dead, Dante said, and your brother's name was in his ledger. The shame of it hit with a physical force I wasn't ready for. I had paid Luca's rent twice in 6 months, covered his gambling mistakes with savings I should have guarded for school, lied to myself because love is embarrassing that way it keeps making excuses after reason has left the room. You thought I knew, I said. I thought it was possible. The distinction hurt more than accusation. Get out, I whispered. No one moved. I looked at Dante. Please, just get out. He did. That was almost worse. Hours later, after I cried exactly once and hated myself for doing it, I found the strength to read the back of the recipe card. More numbers. Chemical shorthand. A supplier code I recognized from Belladonna's wine invoices. It connected not to Viscari, to Bianco Imports. I took the card straight to Dante's office. No knocking, no dignity left to protect. Matteo Gallo rose from the sofa when I entered, but Dante lifted a hand and he stayed put. "This code," I said, crossing the room. "It's not Marco Viscari's. It's Bianco's shipping channel." Dante stood slowly. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "How?" "Because Belladonna bought citrus liqueur through them last Christmas. The invoice had the same supplier stamp." I held up the card. My father wasn't writing a recipe, he was leaving a trail. Matteo took the paper, scanned it, and went still. "Cesare?" he asked. The name meant nothing to me. It clearly meant everything to Dante. His jaw locked once. "Leave us." Matteo obeyed. When the door shut, I realized I was shaking, not from fear, from the brutal thrill of understanding something that mattered. Dante came around the desk. "You saw what my men missed. I worked service, not miracles. Don't do that." "What?" "Make yourself smaller after being useful." My throat tightened around words I hadn't expected him to say. He took the card from my hand, but his fingers paused against mine for one dangerous second too long. Warm, dry, controlled, and almost, always. "Cesare Bianco is my godbrother," he said. "If your father left his name hidden in this, then Marco Viscari was only the front. Why would my father warn your sister?" His eyes held something old and rough in them now. "Because the poison that killed her came through one of our kitchens." I stopped breathing again. "She ate from my plate," he said. No drama, no visible break, which made the words land harder. She was 19. She liked stealing the first bite because she knew it annoyed me. I covered my mouth. For a moment I saw it, not in detail. Worse, in shape, a family table. A joke made twice. A girl reaching across. A brother too late. "He thinks he can do it again," Dante said softly. "This time with me." The room had gone very quiet, and I understood then why he had looked at the broken plate the way men looked at graves. "I'm sorry," I said. He nodded once, like accepting sorrow as a useless but honorable currency. When I turned to leave, his hand closed around my elbow. Gentle, firm, impossible to ignore. "Luca kept quiet because he thought he could fix it," he said. "That kind of pride runs in families." I looked at him over my shoulder. "So does saving people quietly, apparently." My eyes burned for reasons I refused to inspect. That night, I made blood orange semifreddo for the house. Bitter at the bottom from dark caramel. Light in the middle. A glazed shell on top that looked flawless until a spoon touched it. Nino took one bite and whispered, scandalized, "This tastes like heartbreak in evening wear." I almost smiled. Upstairs, Dante sent for the second helping. Betrayal had a new name now. Cesare Bianco. Word did not announce itself with drums. It came as phone calls taken in other rooms, black cars idling after midnight, men checking doorways twice, Marta quietly moving me from the east wing to the room beside hers without explanation. By the third day, even the flowers in the front hall seemed to be holding their breath. I had not seen Luca. I had not stopped thinking about Dante's sister, and I had become aware in the most humiliating possible way of where Dante stood in every room before I looked. Near exits. Near me. Never carelessly. We left the villa just after sunset for what Dante called a necessary appearance, a charity auction at a palazzo off Via Giulia. Old money pretending to cleanse itself with violins and gold leaf. Marta refused to let me wear black because, according to her, if you're frightened, at least frighten them beautifully. She put me in deep blue silk and diamond earrings that probably had blood in their ancestry. Nino nearly wept when he saw the canapé trays. "I am being tested by God and rich people simultaneously," he murmured. "If Marta loved me, she would let me die with focaccia in my hand." "She doesn't love you," I whispered. "Exactly. Cruelty." Dante arrived last. Of course he did. His gaze found me across the marble foyer and stayed there 1 second too long to be accidental. Then he offered me his arm with formal distance, as if we were strangers borrowing elegance. "Stay close." I always do, apparently. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Inside, chandeliers burned over silk gowns and polished lies. Men kissed cheeks they'd order broken tomorrow. Women smiled with diamonds at their throats and calculations in their eyes. I stood beside Dante and learned what power looked like when it wore manners. Twice he moved me without appearing to, a hand at my back to redirect me from one corridor. A quiet, "not that" staircase near my ear. Once, when an older senator's son let his gaze linger down my dress, Dante simply looked at him. The man blanched and found somewhere else to exist, and almost happened on the balcony. Of course it did. I had stepped out for air after realizing the dessert course included almond lace on the petit fours, and my nerves had decided symbolism was too on the nose. The night beyond the stone balustrade smelled like river water and cigarette smoke and rain still trapped in the city's skin. Dante came out behind me. "I told you to stay close. I'm on the balcony, not in Albania. That's not the same thing." I turned. "Do you always answer fear with control?" Usually. The honesty startled me. Music drifted through the open doors behind him. His tie had loosened by a fraction. The sight of that tiny imperfection affected me more than it should have. "I found out today," I said, staring at the lights over the river, "that Florence answered my application 2 weeks ago." He said nothing. I got in. Still nothing. I laughed once, without humor. That was supposed to mean something very different when I opened the letter. His voice came low beside me. "You can still go." I turned sharply. "Can I?" His face gave nothing away. Then the glass doors exploded inward. Gunfire followed. Dante hit me before terror did his body against mine, driving me to the floor as shards rained over the balcony tiles. The first shooter dropped before I even understood Dante had drawn. The second got close enough for me to see his mouth open around a curse before Matteo put a bullet through his throat from inside the ballroom. People screamed, someone shouted in Italian. Another shooter from the far corridor. Dante shoved me behind a stone column and stepped out into the line of fire like the night had offended him personally. "No," I whispered. He didn't hear me. Or maybe he did, and moved anyway. The fight ended fast. That was the worst kind. The practiced kind. But one of the men had gotten farther in than he should have. Far enough to slash Matteo across the side with the blade before he went down. Far enough to send the room into total collapse. We were moved before the police sirens arrived. Different cars, different route. A safe house outside the city where pines crowded close to the windows and the walls smelled faintly of smoke and old winters. Only after the door shut behind us did my hands begin to shake. Dante saw. He took my wrists carefully, turning my palms up as if checking for cuts. His thumbs brushed the inside of them once, twice. "You're safe. I watched them try to kill you." His jaw tightened. "And fail." I laughed then, one ragged sound away from crying. Is that supposed to help? He looked at me for so long I forgot what my own question was. Then, quietly, almost to himself, "It was your silence." I blinked. "What?" "The first night." His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to my eyes. "You moved the plate. No scene. No bargain. No fear for yourself before everyone else. You saved every person in that room, not just me." Something in my chest opened and hurt. "Dante." He lifted a hand and touched one strand of hair at my temple. Barely. The restraint in it was harder to bear than hunger would have been. "Little sparrow," he said, and the name no longer sounded cold. "Do you understand what that did to me?" No. No. Yes. Too much. I was the one who moved first, though not by much. Only enough to lean into the warmth of his hand. Only enough to admit I wasn't moving away. His breath changed. That was all. He bent his forehead to mine and stopped there, eyes closed, as if even that cost him. "If you kiss me," I whispered, voice breaking on the truth of it, "I think I'll be afraid of how much I wanted you to." His eyes opened. That look nearly undid me. He kissed me anyway, softly, once. No rush, no claiming. Just the slow, careful answer to something we had both been avoiding. My fingers caught in his jacket. His hand slid to my jaw. When the kiss deepened by a fraction, I trembled, and he pulled back. Of course he did. Dante, not like this. His voice was rough now, almost unrecognizable. Not while your pulse is still running from bullets. The refusal landed like tenderness sharpened to pain. A knock hit the door. Matteo, pale but upright, said, "Boss, Bianco hit 3 of our routes tonight. He's not hiding anymore." Dante's face changed back. War put its hand on the room. He looked at me once more before turning away. War had arrived. The cost of loving danger is that sometimes it charges before love has a chance to name itself. Matteo's wound was deep enough to keep him in bed for 2 days, and shallow enough that everyone kept calling him lucky. I learned quickly that men in Dante's world measured luck by survival alone, not by pain. March had changed his bandages in the downstairs study while he complained with stoic dignity and asked me, every single time, whether I had eaten. "Why do all of you keep asking me that?" I demanded on the 3rd morning. "Because frightened people stop," he said. I wanted to tell him I had stopped years ago, that I only performed motion convincingly. Instead, I took the soup bowl he offered and sat with him while sunlight cut across the carpet and the house pretended it was still a house. That afternoon, Luca finally called. Not me, Dante. I knew because I heard his voice flatten through the office door before he summoned me in. "He's alive," Dante said the second I entered. Relief was so sharp it hurt. "Where is he?" "He won't say." Dante stood behind the desk, one hand braced against the wood, phone in the other. "He claims he took a job from men he didn't know belonged to Bianco." "That sounds like Luca." "He also says Bianco told him you were safer if he stayed away." I shut my eyes. Of course, my brother. The word landed uglier than the debt had. Luca had always loved me in the selfish, frantic way drowning people loved shore. He clung. He promised. He lied because panic made liars of weak men and saints of almost no one. "When did you find out?" I asked. "This morning, and you didn't tell me." I was trying to get him first. Something hot and helpless tore through me. "You don't get to decide what I can survive." "No," Dante said. "I decide what reaches you if I can stop it." The office went still. I hated him a little for that sentence. I hated the part of me that understood it. By dusk, Luca was found in a tenement near Tiburtina, blood at his lip, wrist zip-tied, fear leaking out of him in visible waves. They brought him to a secondary house, not the villa. Smaller, concrete walls, one hanging bulb in the kitchen. He looked younger than 21 when he saw me. "Elena." I slapped him. The sound cracked the room. Nino looked at the ceiling and murmured, "Fair, completely fair." Luca touched his cheek and started crying so fast I nearly slapped him again just to stop it. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God, Lena, I didn't know who they were at first. I only gave them your shifts because they said it was debt collection, just pressure, just..." My stomach turned over. Dante had known before I did. Across the room, he didn't move, didn't interrupt. He only watched me break in exactly the place he had expected. "You sold my schedule?" I whispered. Luca folded in on himself. "I thought I could fix it." I laughed once. It sounded sick. "That's our family disease, apparently." He reached for me. I stepped back. That hurt him. Good. The next hour came apart in fragments. Matteo arguing for immediate relocation. Marta packing cash and passports into a leather bag. Nino saying, "If anyone asks, I was born for chaos, but I'd prefer smaller portions." Dante giving orders in that flat, controlled voice of his while men moved around him like the room had become an extension of his will. Then he turned to me and placed a train ticket in my hand. "Florence, 9:20. I stared at it. "You said I could still go," I said. "I'm saying it again." The house had gone silent around us. Even Luca stopped making noise. Dante continued, "You leave tonight with Marta and 2 cars. New papers, money, school if you still want it." "And Luca?" Dante's eyes shifted to my brother. He stays. Luca made a broken sound. I couldn't tell if it was fear or shame. I looked back at Dante. With you? With the consequences. The truth of his world stood between us then, terrible and clean. My brother had sold me without meaning to. Dante would not pretend intention erased damage. Neither, if I was honest, could I. Outside, the station smelled like rain on iron and overheated brakes. Loudspeakers crackled overhead. People moved with their ordinary little lives, clutched in shopping bags and briefcases, while mine stood on the edge of splitting in two. Marta stayed close. Nino carried my bag and muttered, "If this train serves dry sandwiches, I will take it as a personal insult from the north." I should have smiled. I couldn't. On the far side of the platform, Dante stood with Matteo and 2 guards, not coming nearer. Not making this harder with softness he didn't know how to offer. His coat moved slightly in the wind. His face gave me nothing. And almost. One more. The train lights appeared around the bend. Marta touched my elbow. "If you're going, go now." I looked at the ticket. At Florence, printed in clean black ink. The life I had wanted. Sugar work. Classrooms. Mornings that did not begin with armed men and coded grief. Then a shot cracked through the station. Matteo jerked. For one stunned second, nobody understood what had happened. Then blood spread dark through his coat and Dante moved, shoving me behind a concrete column as screams ripped up and down the platform. Chaos opened everywhere at once. Luca shouted my name. Another shot. Dante fired back without seeming to. Efficient. Exact. People dropped flat. Glass burst somewhere near the kiosk. Nino tackled Marta behind a luggage cart and shouted, "If I die in sensible shoes, tell everyone I objected." Matteo hit one knee, hand locked over his side. He had taken the bullet meant for Dante. I knew it with animal certainty. The train shrieked into the station anyway, indifferent, monstrous, silver. "Get on," Dante snapped at me. I stared at him. He meant it. Even now, even with Matteo bleeding. Even with Luca sobbing. Even with gunpowder in the station air and my own dream standing open in front of me with warm lights and numbered seats. I took one step toward the train. Then I saw Matteo trying to rise again. Saw Dante plant himself between me and the sniper line. Saw exactly what this world cost. I could leave. Truly leave. No one was stopping me. The door hissed open. People shoved past. Florence waited on the other side of cowardice and survival, and a different name for grief. I looked at the ticket in my hand. Then I tore it in half. Marta's breath caught. Nino actually said, "Madonna." I ran back. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because I had seen too much to lie to myself now. Florence was a clean future. Dante was not. This world was blood, debt, and the terrible tenderness of a man who would rather lose me than chain me. I chose it anyway. When I reached him, Dante caught my arm hurt enough to steady, not hurt. "What are you doing?" My heart slammed against my ribs, making it impossible to pretend later. His eyes changed, just for a second. Then he pushed Luca toward the rear exit with one hand and fired with the other. "Then stay behind me, little sparrow." I did. The station attack moved us again. By dawn, we were in a fortified apartment above an old textile warehouse on the river, the kind of place with steel shutters hidden behind beautiful wood and locks that answered to thumbprints instead of keys. Matteo survived the night, though barely. The bullet had gone through clean. Marta called that mercy. Matteo, drifting in and out on painkillers, called it inconvenience and asked whether anyone had saved the tiramisu from the villa. Luca slept in a separate room under guard. I did not go see him. I sat in the kitchen with Dante instead, the sky outside a bruised gray and the city not yet fully awake. There was blood on the seam of his cuff he hadn't noticed. I noticed anyway. He was staring at nothing when he said, "You should have taken the train." No. You think choosing me makes anything noble? I think leaving would have made me a liar. His jaw flexed once. The signet ring clicked against the espresso saucer. Clean. Familiar. The sound threaded straight through me. I poured coffee for both of us because doing something with my hands felt safer than saying the wrong truth. When I slid his cup over, my fingers brushed the porcelain and I stopped. The scent under the roast was wrong. Faint, medicinal, bitter at the edge. Not poison, sedative. My eyes lifted slowly. Dante had already reached for the cup. I switched it with mine so fast the ceramic barely whispered over the wood. He went still. Across the doorway, one of the guards moved instinctively. I took a careful sip from the other cup, the clean one, and looked at Dante. Don't. The room held its breath. He understood first. Out, he said to the guard. When the man left, Dante bent, smelled the cup I had taken from him, and a violent stillness came over him that scared me more than rage would have. It came through the pot, I said quietly. Not enough to kill, enough to put you down. Inside the house, he murmured. Yes. His eyes closed for one short second. When they opened again, they were colder than the window glass. We're moving now. We didn't get the chance. The first blast shook the lower warehouse hard enough to rattle every cup in the cabinet. The second killed the lights. Men shouted below us. A door crashed somewhere in the hall. Dante shoved me behind the kitchen island and drew at the same instant. The apartment plunged into dark, broken only by emergency strips along the floor, red and dim and hellish. Stay here, he said. No. His gaze hit me. Elena. 1,000 things lived in the way he said my name then. Command. Fear. A cost he had already counted. I stayed exactly 4 seconds after he left the kitchen. Then the gas canister came through the shattered pantry window. Not gas. Smoke. Heavy and chemical. I dropped to the floor, shirt over my mouth. Footsteps behind me, too close, too many. One hand caught my arm. I elbowed hard. Twisted, bit skin, tasted blood and cologne that wasn't Dante's. A cloth slammed over my face. I fought anyway. The last thing I heard before darkness took shape around the edges was Dante shouting my name for the first time like it could break something open. When I woke, my wrists were tied to the arms of a chair with zip ties and rough rope over them for insurance. My head ached. The room smelled of damp earth, old barrels and citrus peel gone sour, a cellar. One hanging bulb burned over a wooden table set with a single bottle of Barolo, 2 glasses, and a plate of pears. The man who entered carried himself with the easy elegance of money, old enough to feel entitled to forgiveness. Cesare Bianco. I knew him at once from the photographs in Dante's office, same dark eyes, same Roman nose, but where Dante's stillness felt held, Cesare's felt hollowed out. A charm polished thin from use. Elena Rossi, he said. You look so much like your father that it's honestly irritating. My mouth went dry. You killed him. He uncorked the wine himself. Eventually, the word struck harder than a confession. Your father was clever. Too clever. He thought finding one poisoned chain would make him righteous. Cesare poured 2 glasses. Men like him forget that systems survive on people willing to look away. Dante didn't. Cesare smiled without humor. Dante saw too late. That's his tragedy. He still believes that makes him different. There it was. The mirror, not pure evil. Worse, a version of Dante stripped of restraint, convinced love only made weak spots. He was supposed to inherit softness from his mother, Cesare said, setting a glass near me like we were dining. Then Beatrice died and I thought perhaps he'd become useful, but grief made him principled. Tiresome. My stomach turned. You ordered it? I ordered a warning. He lifted one shoulder. Children are terrible at obeying seating plans. I thought of Dante saying she stole the first bite. The listener would know before the heroine. I know now. Anyway. I stared at him. You loved him. Cesare's face changed. Not much. Enough. Once. That was the complicated thing. He had. In the ruined, corrosive way some men loved the people they could not stop competing with. A door opened behind him. Luca was shoved into the cellar, wrists bound, lips split open again. Lena. Rage burned away the last of my fear. You used him." "Of course," Cesare said. "Desperate boys are the cheapest doors in any city." He moved behind me then, one hand light against the back of my chair. "Your father tried to pass evidence to Beatrice because he believed she was the only one Dante would always listen to. When that failed, he ran. He almost got away." I closed my eyes once, then opened them and looked at the table. Barolo. Pears. Bitter citrus in the damp air. Old casks stacked by the wall. Industrial cleaning solvent in an uncapped bottle near the drain. My father used to say a kitchen and a cellar told the truth if you paid attention. I paid attention. Cesare crouched in front of me. "Dante is on his way. He'll come because he still thinks love is a reason to expose his throat." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And you think that makes him weak? I think it makes him predictable." After he left taking Luca with him, I worked the zip tie against the sharp metal edge under the chair arm until the plastic bit into my skin. Slow. Quiet. No scene. The bulb hummed above me. Somewhere overhead I heard the first gunshots. Too late had arrived. For a long time the only sound in the cellar was the plastic rasp of the zip tie cutting deeper into my wrist. Then it snapped. Pain flared. Relief came with it. I bent double immediately, fingers clumsy from numbness, and worked on the rope. By the time the first heavy footfalls crossed the room above me, I had one hand free and blood on both. I stood too fast and the world tipped. No time. The cleaning solvent bottle by the drain was industrial citrus alcohol. Sharp enough to strip grease, flammable enough to matter. Beside the casks sat a crate of old-tasting candles and a broken match tin. My father had taught me once, in a kitchen too small for all our hope, that sugar burned hotter than people thought, and alcohol spread flame faster than fear could run. I tore the tablecloth, soaked one end, shoved it into the neck of the bottle, and waited by the cellar door. When the first guard came down, he expected panic. He got glass. The bottle shattered against the wall beside him in a wash of fire bright enough to turn his shout into pure animal sound. I ran through the confusion, kicked the fallen gun beyond his reach, and slammed the iron latch from the outside. Smoke curled fast through the stairwell. Above me, the warehouse had become war. Orange crates split across the concrete. Forklifts sat crooked between stacks of imported fruit and contraband liquor. Men shouted over gunfire in Sicilian and Roman dialect both. Somewhere to my left, Nina was yelling, "If anyone shoots near the produce again, I'm resigning and opening a bakery." That absurdity nearly made me laugh. A hand seized my shoulder. I spun. Marta. For one stunned second we only stared at each other. Her cheek was cut. There was powder on her sleeve. "Good," she snapped. "You're mobile." Nino came? Against my better judgment and with 3 complaints per minute. She shoved a gun into my hand, saw the way I looked at it, and took it back. On second thought, "Stay behind me." Luca, South Corridor. Another burst of shots tore through the warehouse. Men dropped flat behind pallets. Through the open loading bay, rain slashed silver against the yard lights. Then I saw Dante. He moved through the center aisle like the storm belonged to him. Coat gone, white shirt open at the throat, gun low in one hand, blood at the shoulder that wasn't stopping him. He turned, fired once, twice, and the men coming up behind a stack of crates folded before they finished raising their weapons. I had seen him dangerous before. I had never seen him desperate. His gaze found me across the warehouse. He stopped. Not physically. Something inside him. A visible arrest, as if the fact of me standing upright, untied, alive, had reached a part of him the bullets hadn't. Then he came. Fast enough that I only had time to think his name. He reached me, gripped the back of my neck, forehead hitting mine hard enough to hurt. "Are you hurt?" My wrists. "That's not what I asked." "I'm here." His eyes closed once. Brief, breaking point contained in a single second. Then he stepped back because he had to, because the warehouse was still full of men trying to kill him, and looked over my head at Marta. "Get her out." No, the word came from both of us. Somewhere behind us, Nino slid in on wet concrete beside a crate of blood oranges, clutching a shotgun with theatrical disgust. For the record, I hate everything about this evening, including cardio, smoke, and being ignored by Marta in life-threatening settings. Marta didn't even look at him, move left. I moved beautifully under criticism. Then quieter, to me, as another volley cracked overhead. She kissed my forehead before we left the car. If I die, make sure that's on the priest's paperwork. Despite everything, a startled sound escaped me. Nino grinned once, wild and alive. There she is! Dante heard it. His gaze flicked to my mouth and something raw passed through his face before he sealed it again. A small revelation. Enough. Bianco's upstairs, Matteo's voice came through the comms, ragged from pain and distance. Office mezzanine, he's got the boy. Luca. Dante's expression changed. I touched his arm before I could stop myself. Don't let him die for me. He didn't almost die for you, Dante said. He almost died because he sold a door to the devil. The truth cut. He saw it cut. One brief line of regret crossed his face. Then he leaned in, so close only I could hear him over the gunfire. But he's still yours, he said. That was the most merciful thing he could have said, which frightened me more than if he'd lied. He sent Marta and Nino with me toward the side stairs while he cut for the mezzanine from below. Halfway up, I smelled it before anyone else. Gas. Not from the weapons. From the old heating line running behind the office wall. Stop, I said. Marta did, instantly. Nino nearly collided with her back. Why are we stopping? I'm emotionally committed to survival. Gas, I whispered, if anyone fires up there. Understanding flashed across Marta's face. She hit the comm. Boss, no shots in the office. Heating line. Too late. One muzzle flash burst under the mezzanine door. The wall jumped. Flame roared blue-white through the seam. The blast threw us all sideways. When my hearing returned in pieces, I was on the concrete with orange peel stuck to my sleeve and Dante on one knee 10 feet away, blood running down the side of his face. He was already trying to rise. Beyond the flames, Cesare Bianco stepped into view with Luca dragged in front of him by the collar, a gun at my brother's throat and sorrow arranged on his face like good tailoring. The final shape of the villain stood fully visible then. And all of us knew the same thing. Not all of us would survive him. The fire cut the warehouse into pieces. Flame crawled up the office wall in bright, hungry veins. Smoke pushed low across the mezzanine ceiling. Cesare stood behind Luca, as if using boys as shields were merely another form of etiquette. Dante rose fully. Blood ran from his temple into the collar of his shirt, but his hand stayed steady on the gun. That was the terrible thing about him. Injury never made him loud. It only made him quieter. Let him go, Dante said. Cesare laughed softly. He sold her for debt. You're still bargaining for him? This is why father should have named me. There it was, the oldest wound beneath all the newer ones. Not greed alone. Rejection. Being almost family and never chosen. Dante took one step forward. My father named me because he knew what you were. No. Cesare's eyes flashed. He named you because your mother was softer to look at in church. Even Luca flinched. I had never heard Dante's father speak, never seen him. But suddenly I understood how men like Cesare were made not by one cruelty, but by being fed scraps of love until they mistook hunger for destiny. Mirror. Alternate path. The man Dante could have become if Beatrice's death had killed the last living thing in him. Smoke thickened. Somewhere below, men shouted for the fire suppression valves. Nino coughed theatrically and yelled, "If anyone survives this, I'm eating bread tomorrow out of spite." No one answered him. We were beyond that kind of mercy. Cesare pressed the gun harder to Luca's throat. Put yours down. Dante didn't move. I looked from one man to the other and saw it then. Cesare wanted surrender more than death. He needed Dante bent, needed proof that love could be used to pull him to his knees. I also saw the metal glint near Cesare's foot. A serving trolley overturned in the blast. On it, a silver chafing dish with sterno fuel still burning blue beneath. Heat line. Pressure. A stupid, fragile chance. I stepped sideways. Marta caught my wrist. No. If he fires, Luca dies. If you move, you might. Yes. Her eyes searched mine for one brutal second. Then she let go. I picked up a loose orange from the floor. My father would have laughed at the absurdity. My mother would have called it instinct and prayed after. I threw. Not at Caesare. At the sterno. The fruit struck the fuel tin hard enough to skid it under the broken serving trolley. Flame licked up the grease and cloth still hanging from the frame. Cesare glanced down by reflex. Luca used the moment. He dropped. Dante fired. So did Cesare. The first bullet took Cesare high in the chest. The second hit Luca in the shoulder as he twisted away. My brother cried out and fell against the rail. Smoke surged between them. Then Matteo came out of nowhere. He had no business being on his feet, let alone climbing stairs with a fresh wound in his side. But there he was, pale as paper, barreling through the haze just as a hidden shooter emerged behind the office door and aimed directly at Dante's back. Matteo took the bullet meant for him. He staggered, turned anyway, and put 2 shots into the second gunman before collapsing against the railing with a sound that will probably live in me forever. "Matteo!" I screamed. Everything broke at once. Dante reached him in 2 strides, catching him before he hit the floor. Cesare, bleeding and furious, tried to crawl for the dropped weapon near the desk. Marta shot it out of reach. Nino, sobbing and swearing in the same breath, dragged Luca down the side stairs by the belt while yelling, "If you die, your sister will haunt all of us, and I don't have the wardrobe for guilt." Matteo's blood spread fast over Dante's hands. "Stay with me," Dante said. Matteo smiled a little. "Even then, you always say that like it's an order." "It is." Matteo's gaze found me over Dante's shoulder. "He's worse now that you're here." My breath caught in something like a laugh and a sob at once. He looked back at Dante. "That's good, boss. Means there's still a man in there." Then the light in his eyes changed. Small. Final. Gone. For 1 second, Dante didn't move. The entire warehouse seemed to feel it. Then he stood and turned toward Cesare. I had never seen emptiness weaponized before. Now I did. Cesare tried to speak. Maybe an excuse. Maybe Dante's name. It didn't matter. Dante crossed the distance, took the gun from Marta's outstretched hand without looking, and put 1 bullet into the center of the man he had once called brother. No speech. No spectacle. No pardon. The old family ended in a burning warehouse that smelled like oranges and gas and death. After, there were sirens far away and our own people arriving faster. Fire suppression finally hissed from the ceiling. Luca was alive. Wounded, white with shock. Nino was crying openly now and blaming smoke, bad luck, and upper body exertion. Marta knelt beside Matteo and closed his eyes with 2 fingers that did not tremble. Dante didn't look at anyone. He looked at his own hands. At Matteo's blood on them, I went to him carefully, as if approaching something holy or injured or both. He didn't seem to know I was there until I touched his wrist. His gaze lifted. The grief in it was almost unbearable because he still refused to perform it. "It cost you," I whispered. "Yes." He looked past me once at Matteo's body, at Luca breathing, at the flames dying into steam, then back at me, and said, the only words left for a night like that, "It is over." War leaves behind paperwork. That felt obscene, but true. 3 weeks after the warehouse, I sat in Dante's legal office signing statements with a fountain pen that scratched too loudly while men in sober suits discussed asset seizures, shipping reroutes, and the stabilization of family interests. As if Matteo had not died with Dante's name in his mouth. Luca survived surgery. Dante did not kill him. That mercy came with iron attached. Luca gave a full statement on Bianco's network and left Rome under a protection arrangement so conditional it barely counted as freedom. I saw him once before he went. We cried. We did not fix each other. Some damage was too honest for neatness. That, too, was love. Marta moved through the villa after Matteo's funeral as if grief were a task she could keep upright by force. Nino followed her around carrying tea, ledgers, and catastrophically bad flirtation. "You should eat," he told her one evening. "You should stop talking. That's not how courtship works." She stared at him for so long I thought she might finally kill him and improve the atmosphere. Instead, she took the tea. Nino floated for 3 hours after that and announced at dinner, "We are progressing, slowly, like a hostage negotiation but with deeper feeling." Even Dante nearly smiled. I spent more time in the kitchen again because it was the only room where my body remembered how to exhale. The staff had stopped watching me like an unexploded device. Some of them even asked questions. On Sundays, I tested dessert menus for the small cafe Dante planned to fund, in Trastevere under my name. "Legitimate money," he said, "or as legitimate as men like us could manage." Men like us. The first time he said that, I noticed. The second time, I let it matter. One evening in late autumn, I was cracking burnt sugar over a rosemary pear tart when the kitchen door opened behind me. I didn't turn. I recognized the silence first, then the colder scent of night clinging to wool, then the soft exact click of Dante's signet ring as he rested his hand on the porcelain counterbowl beside me. Our motif. Open and still alive. "You're late," I said. "Traffic. You own half the traffic. That doesn't improve it." I smiled at the tart because smiling directly at him had become dangerous in quieter ways than before. "Marta says the notary sent back the Fine Cafe lease." "She did. And? It's yours." I stopped moving. Not because of the cafe. Because of the way he said it. Not gift. Not favor. Ownership returned to someone who had lost too much of it. I set the torch down carefully. "You can't just hand me a life. No?" He came closer. "So I'm asking if you want the one we built room for." I turned then. He wasn't in a suit, just dark trousers and a charcoal sweater with the sleeves pushed once at the forearms. Something about that nearly undid me more than formal power ever had. Ordinary Dante. The rarest version. In his hand sat a small velvet box. I stared. Then at him, then back at the box because panic likes repetition. "This is a terrible kitchen conversation," I said. "I know. Shouldn't there be candles? A violin? A traumatic amount of champagne? I can arrange less of that than you think." I laughed softly, then covered my mouth because the sound came out shaky. "Dante." He set the box beside the tart and did not open it. That mattered. He wasn't presenting treasure. He was asking for risk. "My mother wanted me to propose in a church one day," he said. "Beatrice wanted me to do it badly so she could laugh at me afterward." His gaze held mine, steady and unguarded in a way that felt more intimate than any touch we'd shared. "This is neither of those things." "No," I whispered. "No." He glanced at the sugar shell, at the hairline crack spreading gold under kitchen light. "It's this. After blood. After choice. After you stayed when you could have left clean." My eyes burned. He opened the box then. Inside lay a ring far simpler than I expected. Old gold oval-cut diamond, tiny chips of age in the band. Not perfect, real. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "She once stabbed my grandfather with a serving fork before agreeing to marry him. Everyone called it romance. I laughed through tears this time. A near kiss hovered between us immediately after. One more almost. He lifted a hand to my cheek. I leaned in. He stopped just short, waiting, always giving me the last inch. "I don't know how to do this well," he said. "I know. And if you say no, the cafe is still yours. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be." I looked at the ring, at him, at the kitchen around us, the room where I had first made something he trusted enough to taste, where grief had stood shoulder to shoulder with hunger and somehow become survivable. "I'm still afraid sometimes," I admitted. "Of me?" My answer took too long. "That's not a no," he said. I shook my head. "Not of you. Of what loving you means. Of waking up one day and realizing I learned your darkness too well." He absorbed that without flinching. Then tell me when it happens. That was the thing. He would never promise to be harmless, only truthful. I stepped closer. His thumb brushed the corner of my mouth. If you ask me now, I said, voice unsteady with the cost of it, I'll say yes before I feel ready, and I think maybe that's the only honest version. Something warm and wrecked moved through his face. Elena Rossi, he said quietly. Will you marry me? Yes. He exhaled like a man setting down a weapon after years. When he slid the ring onto my finger, his hand shook once. Then he bent and kissed me slow, warm, no hurry left in it at all. Thank you, he murmured against my mouth. For what? A pause. For coming back, little sparrow. The nickname landed there softly, completely changed. And for the first time, it felt like home. 9 months later, the villa sounded different on Sundays. Less like a fortress, more like a house trying, against its own history, to deserve the name. The fountain in the drive had been repaired. Marta claimed the old one offended her, aesthetically. Nino claimed she did it because romance made her reckless with municipal beauty, which earned him a napkin to the face and, later, an extra helping of roasted potatoes that he described as a legally binding declaration of affection. My cafe in Trastevere had opened in spring under the name Glass Heart. Dante objected to the vulnerability of the title and then invested in better chairs without telling me. We fought about invoices twice a week and slept in the same bed every night. Luca wrote from Bologna under another surname and sent me clumsy apologies buried inside weather updates and football scores. I wrote back when I could. Not always. Healing was not a staircase. It was weather too. That unresolved thing remained. Not whether I loved Dante. I did. Whether love could ever make peace with what it had cost to survive. Sunday lunch gathered the living anyway. A few capos, 2 widowed aunts, Nino, who had somehow progressed from tragic admirer to man, allowed to kiss Marta in doorways when he thought no one was looking, though he still reacted to her direct affection as if struck by lightning, Dante's lawyer. The priest who pretended not to know half the table's sins, and us. I was in the kitchen finishing the second course when I heard the familiar cadence of Dante's step pause in the doorway. I didn't turn right away. I was drizzling lemon over artichokes and listening to the small domestic sounds that still startled me with their peace plates warming in the oven. Marta arguing about table linens, Nino loudly insisting that rosemary roasted potatoes should count as spiritual recovery. Then came the sound, a clean click. His signet ring against the porcelain platter beside me. Same as the first night. Different weight entirely. I glanced up. He had loosened his tie already. There was sunlight on one shoulder. No blood anywhere on him. Which still registered in me as a private kind of gratitude. You're hovering, I said. I'm supervising. You're in the way. Also true. He came closer, one hand settling lightly at my back. Not possession. Orientation. The touch that had become part of how my body understood safety. Though it still disturbed me sometimes how much I needed it. On the sideboard sat the plate being taken to him at the head of the table. Veal, sage, browned butter, charred lemon. I smelled it before I saw the garnish. Apricot kernel essence in the reduction. Harmless in such a tiny amount. Culinary, not criminal. But close enough to bitter almond that the wrong memory would arrive at the table before the first bite. My breath caught. Dante felt it. What? I looked at the plate, then at him. Then, without a word, slid it away and traded it for the backup portion waiting beside the stove. 2 steady fingers. No scene, no explanation before necessary. The kitchen went still. Marta noticed first. Her eyes softened by a degree. Nino noticed second and whispered, as if standing inside a church, Madonna. Dante did not move. He only looked at my hands on the porcelain, then at my face. The room around us blurred a little, not literally. Emotion does that. It narrows the edges until only the thing hurting matters. It's only the garnish, I said quietly. Not enough to hurt you, just enough to smell wrong. His gaze stayed on me. and I knew he had gone back, as I had, to another plate. Another room, another version of us when he was still a man who expected betrayal and I was still a waitress with no idea what she'd stepped into. "You still do it," he said. The words were low enough that only I heard them. Yes. Why? The question was ridiculous after everything and somehow not at all. I set the clean plate in front of him and answered with the only truth worth saying. "Because I notice." Something changed in his face then. Not surprise. Recognition deepening into ache. He touched the edge of the plate with his ring. One soft click. Bookend. Blessing. Wound. "When you did it the first time," he said, even quieter, "I thought it unsettled me because no one in my world moved without asking what they'd be paid." His hand came up, fingers warm at the side of my neck. I was wrong. I could hardly breathe. "What was it? You protected everyone in the room," he said, "and you didn't make me watch you be brave." That nearly broke me. I leaned into his hand. "Just enough." From the dining room, Nino called, "If the boss is being emotional over veal again, can we at least sit before the potatoes go tragic?" Marta said, "Nino." He lowered his voice by almost nothing. "I'm preserving order." I laughed softly through the pressure in my chest. Dante's mouth curved. A real one this time. Rare enough that the kitchen seemed to brighten in self-defense. He bent and kissed my forehead. Not hunger, not urgency. Something older. Settled. "Come eat, little sparrow." At the table, he pulled out my chair before taking his own. Small thing. Earned thing. The priest said grace. Nino ate too quickly and got kicked under the table by Marta. Then looked absurdly pleased about it. One of the aunts cried during dessert because the orange cream reminded her of someone she had once loved badly. No one mocked her. Dante kept his hand over mine under the linen when the stories turned to the dead. Ordinary life, I learned, was the most radical thing we had built, and still. When night came and the house quieted, I stood at our bedroom window looking over the dark garden and wondered whether loving a man forged by violence meant accepting that some part of me would always stand with one ear turned toward the gunshot that might come. Whether choosing him had saved me or simply taught me a more elegant way to lose innocence without losing myself. He came up behind me then, wrapped warmth and wool and cedar around my back, and rested his chin lightly near my temple. "What are you thinking?" I watched the fountain throw silver into the dark. That peace feels frightening when you've had to earn it. His arms tightened once. "Yes," he said, "nothing solved. Everything chosen. That was enough."